This episode is sponsored by the IoT job site, the world's only dedicated space for applying for and advertising IoT vacancies across the world. Register now for job alerts or get in touch via let's talk at theiotjobsite.com.
Welcome to the IoT podcast show. I'm your host Tom White, and you may have noticed I have a new laptop, which I'm thrilled about, but I won't take all my time talking about that today. I'm very pleased to welcome to the show our second guest, actually, for the IoT podcast from Arm, David Maidment. David is the Senior Director of Secure Device Ecosystem at Arm, and also is involved with PSA Certified. Some of you may know what PSA Certified is, and some of you may not, but today we're going to find out more about that and its role within IoT security. David, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you, Tom. It's great to be here with you.
It's great to have you here, and another person from Arm. Our viewers may have remember Stephen Patterson from about 18 months ago that joined us to talk about IoT security from Arm. You're here primarily to talk about the PSA Certified Initiative that you're involved in. So without further ado, could you just explain a little bit more about your role as Senior Director of Secure Device Ecosystems at Arm, David?
Absolutely.
And what PSA Certified actually is?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very happy to do that. So as per your introduction, so I'm Senior Director of Secure Devices Ecosystem at Arm. And I'm actually working in the architecture and technology group within Arm. So that role is to lead a group that works and interacts with the industry. So, you know, for your listeners that are familiar, you know, Arm is a leading licensor of IP, intellectual property, to, you know, primarily chip companies. So a lot of the chips that are used in all of our digital devices are built on Arm technology. The group that I work in actually works with, you know, most of the leading chip companies around the world, and we work with those companies in order to drive, I guess the easiest way of describing it is higher levels of collaboration and understanding around security. So I have a group that is kind of globally based. We have an activity around driving security best practice. That's both in terms of, you know, obviously products built on Arm, but also the market in general, and you know, we can talk a bit more about that in a minute. So the focus is very much on, you know, driving that collaboration across the ecosystem from an Arm point of view, and, you know, really excited to be a part of that. In terms of PSA Certified, so PSA Certified is actually a sort of an independent brand that was co-founded by Arm. So we, about 5 years ago, Arm published a security manifesto, which was really a sort of a call to the industry saying, you know, actually the world is becoming more connected. You know, we talk a lot about IoT. The need for security is becoming ubiquitous. And as the electronics industry, we need to come together and we need to be able to address that. We need to be able to build confidence in the products that are being delivered today. So that security manifesto resulted in a project within Arm, which is PSA, which, you know, we do love our three-letter acronym. So PSA is Platform Security Architecture. And PSA started off really as a set of guidelines, specifications, best practice in order to guide both the chip manufacturers and also the wider developer community on best practice within security. So we kind of kicked that off about 5 years ago, but what we noticed as part of that was a real demand to have a measure on that. You know, how do we as an industry know that we're doing well with security? It's kind of a hard thing to measure. It's you know, a lot of people talk in different ways about security. So that was really where PSA Certified was born, and we launched it back in February 2019. So it's kind of the last normal embedded world that we had, I would say, where we're kind of you know, running around at all the different stands, having a great show and launching and announcing our certified partners. And it's a certification program that was set up between Arm and a number of leading cybersecurity labs. So we're a co-founder, but as a scheme, it's run in an independent way, and it will certify effectively any architecture against a benchmark set of requirements. And, you know, today we We've gone through effectively certifying. So I think we're over 20 semiconductor companies now that are part of that. And it's really built on what we describe as a root of trust. So it's kind of recognizing that the security challenge is not just a software challenge. It's something that's built into the very architecture of the silicon. And PSA Certified is a way of describing it and a way of measuring it and a way for independent security labs to then perform that certification. So we certify, kind of the silicon. We also look at the software, and then at the final stage, we look at the OEMs as well.
Yeah.
So a very broad introduction. I've covered a lot of topics there. Happy to dig deeper into certain areas. But I think that, as you probably pick up, passionate about driving that best practice and actually passionate about delivering as well a language to the market, a common way for people to understand and be able to describe security and what that means for their products and their businesses.
Thank you, for the introduction to that, David. I mean, it's incredibly good to see that you've got over, did you say 20 different silicon businesses signed
so
up?
we have. So it's incredible. I kind of sort of remind myself every day how incredible that is, because these are the biggest chip companies in the world that are getting behind this. Very focused on IoT and embedded. So we kind of started off a lot of the class of products that were certified in the early stage have been more what we would traditionally consider microcontroller or connected microcontroller. So these devices are small, power efficient. They run communication stacks that can talk to networks. And because of that, they're vulnerable. They attach to the network. They're part of the IoT. So we have over 20 companies certified. We actually have 3 levels of certification. And we already have 2 partners now certified at level 3 as well. So we kind of have 3 levels of certification. One level is sort of a basic on-ramp, if you like. It covers all of the security best practices. Level 2 is really a lab-based evaluation looking at devices' ability to protect against scalable software attacks. And then level 3 builds in extra lab-based evaluation to look at the device's capabilities to protect against physical attacks, lightweight physical attacks. And we continue, there's a roadmap of innovation that will continue to go behind that. So 20 chip companies certified today. We're just getting pretty close to having 100 certified products. It's ramping pretty quick, and it's really amazing to be able to see these sort of tier 1 semiconductor brands getting behind this initiative and recognizing the need to be able to both promote their products' abilities to support security, but also do it in a consistent way that the ecosystem will understand what that means, particularly to developers and device manufacturers.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic, isn't it? I mean, the need for IoT security is often well spoken about, and we've talked about it on the podcast in several different episodes. But that common understanding is something that has lacked in the past. And ARM really took the initiative to begin this PSA certification program. And it's great to see so many people have joined, because it really is a collaborative effort. Otherwise,
I think.
Sorry, please.
No, I was going to say. Sorry to interrupt. I was going to say it's obviously at one level we're ARM. We of course passionate about ARM-based products, but at the other level, ARM and actually all of the partners that are part of PSA Certified recognize the need for the industry to behave in a common way around a framework that gives that language of description. And I think what PSA Certified has done is given all parts of the industry the ability to understand what it means. So it's what we describe as assurance. There's the ability of the device to protect against bad actors. Depends on effectively the architecture of the device. When you're developing that product, you would go through a threat model. You would think about the kind of threats that device might be vulnerable to. If it's something that's mounted in a way that would allow physical attacks to happen, then that's something you'd need to build in. So having that common language has been very powerful, and promoting it through multiple voices has been very powerful. And actually, I think that term collaboration is something that everybody within PSA Certified is really passionate about, and that's not only at the PSA Certified level. I'd say that's the way that PSA Certified as a foundational scheme then fits with other schemes as well.
Yeah.
So, we've made a few announcements along the way. IoXT have a device level certification scheme. They recognize PSA certified as a root of trust. We made an announcement with UL, who's one of the, PSA co-founders and a leading, one of the world's most famous brands actually for, security labs. They recognize it in their own scheme. So I think the ability to work in a collaborative way is really essential actually when we're talking about security and how to solve that.
And for the for the listener that doesn't necessarily understand the need for a common platform, what are the benefits for companies certifying their products and going through a PSA certification, be that 1, 2, or 3 levels?
Yeah, there's several actually. So we kind of often talk about this sort of push and pull in the industry, and actually there's a couple of things that are happening. So one is the sort of regulatory environment is starting to so kind of governments, regulators, and actually standards bodies are recognizing the need for security. If you pull back and think about the very big picture, then we're talking about effectively sort of what we describe as digital transformation. Multiple industries are embracing digital products into their businesses and consumers actually, whether it's smart lighting, smart speakers, a smart factory, connected city, the automotive platform. So I think that first of all, having a common language around it gives that breadth of ecosystem a common way of understanding what they're talking about. It's kind of democratization is a word that's often used. We don't want it to be that only companies with divisions of PhDs can understand what security really means. It kind of touches every part of the ecosystem, to the point where actually in the end what we're talking about is a business risk. So somebody is deploying at scale a business risk. They deploying a digital service. They want to rely on the platform that it's being deployed on, so they want to have some assurance. And having that common language allows both, the procurement of the devices and also the people building the devices to behave in a common way. So I think that's really important. The other part is the regulation, as I was describing. So we kind of see in the US with NIST. So NIST has a set of guidelines, sort of 8259A, and it's kind of well known that there's some activity there. We also see the same in Europe around ETSI with 303645. So these requirements, understanding how your product fits with those requirements becomes important, especially over time as those requirements evolve. And actually, one of the things that we've been very particular to do is to map PSA certified with those evolving requirements in order to make sure that, when people are purchasing effectively PSA certified components, they understand how that relates to the emerging regulatory requirements or how that relates to their own product requirements.
It's fascinating. It really is, and one would imagine, having a common understanding and having 20 different silicon and chip businesses signed up, no mean feat. I can imagine. Lots of different perceptions of what is a common standard. I mean, what were some of the things that you've learned throughout this process and having this common platform? I'm sure lots of discussions were had.
Absolutely. So I think that what we've learned along the way is to effectively have a sort of an easy to understand description of security that can go far and wide. As a kind of extremes of examples. At one end, you're talking to a kind of a tier one semiconductor company that understands in deep detail how to build a root of trust and all of the architecture goes around it. And at the other hand, you're talking to business decision makers that want to deploy services onto these digital platforms, and actually kind of in the middle, stakeholders like cyber insurance companies and areas like that. So joining together the value chain is really important, and having a language that scales. So even the way that I'm describing this today to your listeners, for example, different listeners will have different views and impressions on what security means. And actually, when you talk to different parts of the ecosystem, you realize that it means different things. So, number one, common description, very easy to understand. number two is this collaboration model. So it's not, it allows, how do we best describe it? It allows competition to thrive within a framework. So the way that PSA Certified works, it doesn't lead you to a particular way of solving that problem. It simply gives you a measure of how you've solved that problem. So it allows differentiation in the market. It allows, all these different chip companies, all these different OEMs to differentiate and solve the security problem around that framework and allow them to describe it to their end customers. So I think that's really powerful, actually. And it gives everybody a voice, a kind of collective voice to lift that message. So, the ability to take a trusted component that's been certified, have that available in a development kit. So, for example, we've recently certified a development kit with Arrow, who's a distributor of, so they have a development kit that has PSA certified silicon inside. So that then opens up all of that goodness to developers that, they don't need to kind of get under the hood and really understand all of the deep details. They have a common way of understanding the security that's available on that platform to then enable that for their end users. So that democratization story, that route of linking together the value chain, the combination of language and technology is very powerful. And, it's kind of a privilege, if you like, to be able to work as ARM has in that sort of co-founding mechanism to get that up and running, and to see the momentum that's building behind it as well, to kind of link all those things together.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I can understand, you've got different levels of involvement, interaction, understanding, and to be able to have that common understanding in terms of the PSA certification, and to have people from all different companies and company sizes involved is really fantastic. If we could just step outside from PSA Certified for a moment and just talk about general security within IoT. Often lots of lessons are learned, and hindsight is both a blessing and a curse, especially when it comes to security. In your view, what are the sort of lessons learned recently when it comes to security, and what else is needed to get there to make our devices and our infrastructure more secure?
Yeah, it's about consistency, actually, and consistency in the right way. So, one of the points, it's interesting when we do these kind of sort of discussions across the industry. One of the things I begin to realize is that it's not always widely understood the role of the underlying components in that security story. So when we quite often in a very broad audience, when you talk about security, you think about software, and you think, oh, okay, I have a security vulnerability, I'll download a patch. And I think there's a sort of a conditioning based on our sort of desktop environments. There's a conditioning that it's predominantly a software problem, but actually the role of the components underneath, having what we describe as a root of trust. So a root of trust is the portion of the processor or the chip where all of the secure operations take place, whether that's your crypto, your secure storage, handling your keys. Everything happens in a secure environment on the chip. I think that, the lesson learned is to have your services anchored in a root of trust. And as I said before, there's different ways of achieving that root of trust, but, the measure, we provide a measure for how you've achieved it. So anchoring on a root of trust, that root of trust is your relationship between, let's say, the cloud and your end node. And if you think at scale, you potentially have millions of end nodes. So having that relationship anchored in a root of trust, it sounds simple, but actually, the creation of that in a consistent way, having your keys provisioned onto that root of trust in a trustworthy way, being able to manage that device once it's on its network. Remember, I'm sure this is a sort of a common theme in some of your IoT discussions, is the life cycle of the device. These devices are not sort of 1 or 2 year devices. Often they are in the field for, considerable amount of time. So having a secure relationship with it, trusting that it is the device you think it is, being able to manage its life cycle. So, at a very simple level, can I update the software? And if I do update the software, can I trust that that is the software that I've updated and that it hasn't somehow been manipulated by a bad actor? So we published something called the 10 security goals as a kind of overarching guiding light, if you like, in PSA Certified. It's something that's free to download, and it goes through elements like I've described. You should have a root of trust. There should be some hardware mechanism between the trusted and the non-trusted part of your processor. You should have a lifecycle management. You should be able to update it. You should be able to take it through its entire secure lifecycle. So for us, that's a major lesson learned, is to deploy on devices that are trustworthy. And it's actually a complicated chain of dependencies to make it trustworthy, which is why we started all of this 5 years ago, actually, because you could see the direction that, that the industry was taking. That, for example, just to have your crypto in hardware it doesn't mean you have a secure device. You have, it's got to boot in a secure way. Like I said before, it's got to store its secrets in a secure way. It has to handle the way it runs its software in a secure way. There's many elements to it, and we tend to associate a lot of those elements with more rich operating systems historically, like Linux-based boxes and that kind of thing. But actually, it spans them all. It spans them all. If you look at the sophistication of a embedded device today, it has the same set of requirements for an RTOS as it does for a Linux-based system. So it's a very long answer to your question, but I think for a reason. I think there's anchoring it on a root of trust and caring about that life cycle is really essential to learn the lessons from what we see in the industry.
Yeah, I think the phrase "root of trust" is really poignant, isn't it? Because it's anything on a chip, anything on a board is secure to a degree. It's when it goes into the cloud, no matter how you try and make that secure, there's always going to be vulnerabilities. And talking about cold wallets and crypto storage, I've got a cold wallet. I won't say which one, just in case. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because very sophisticated devices, but that whole common understanding and how it's stored is interesting and can mean different things to different people. But it's nice to hear you talk about it in that way.
It's definitely, and I guess the way we look at it, and again, back to this need for common language, what I've just described it's quite complex. I mean, okay, if you're a sort of PhD security architect, maybe it sounds quite simple, but there's many angles to the way that we can describe it. I think that, the thinking about what we tend to call the threat model, so how that device could become compromised, is important. We do a lot of work talking to OEMs and developers around thinking about that early on in your development cycle, because that helps you choose the components that you put into that device. Thinking about whether that device is liable to a software attack. So as we've just been describing, using the software update mechanism, for example, to download some malware. Or whether it's a device that, for whatever reason, like, I don't know, a smart door lock that could be liable to a hardware attack. And even something as simple as, not using common shared keys. So, for example, if you took a door lock and hacked it, then, one of the principles that we give is, well, because you don't have common shared keys, then if you hack one door lock, you've only hacked one door lock. But, unfortunately, we see examples where common keys are still used sometimes, and if you hack one door lock or one item, you then have a scalable attack, and of course that's terrible. So some of this is like deep architecture. Some of this is actually common sense, good practice. But as an industry, we need to learn that, and we need to go through that learning curve. And actually, in the end, it comes back to reputation. If you think about these devices represent your business, your brand, your company. If they are compromised, it impacts your reputation. It represents damage to your business. So that's what we're seeing at the kind of business end of the discussion is parties caring about it, but maybe parties not always knowing how to solve that problem, which is where schemes like PSA Certified and others come in.
Yeah, I completely agree, because you've touched on two things there. The architecture of the security solution plus human error and
Mm.
the user's interaction with that, and the two sometimes can be juxtaposed, right, depending on who's using it.
Exactly.
And that's always going to be a concern, but an awareness of why it's important. So, yes, the PhD computer architect graduate, is going to understand this and care about it a lot more. But the person that perhaps doesn't really know why they shouldn't change default passwords or even have, encryption keys or even understand the necessity to have that is useful. And this is something that we talk about a lot on the podcast to raise awareness about why this is important in an ever increasing connected world, and hopefully something that the PSA Certified does as well, right? To people outside of the industry, I would imagine.
We do, absolutely, yeah. So proud to promote my own podcast as well. So I host the Beyond the Now podcast on PSAcertified.org, and actually, we deliberately talk to a broad range of industry players. The example I like to give is cyber insurance, actually, or cyber assurance, where there you have a group of companies that are, like any insurance company, they are looking at a risk profile. So, what's the impact, what's the risk profile, and they are effectively modeling that risk. And we know through the discussions we're having that initiatives like PSA Certified feed into their risk modeling, and it allows them to understand, the deployed risk. It doesn't reduce the risk to zero, because no scheme ever would, and this is also a sort of a important part of this security journey, is that you move the risk into a sort of an acceptable bounds based on the threat modeling and the use cases. So that's a big part of what we drive, is this whole use case driven threat modeling. But it's back to that common language, isn't it? And talking to the insurers, talking to the big cloud guys as well, the kind of the hyperscalers, the ones that will have these huge arrays of devices deployed on their clouds. They recognize that a little problem per device that multiplies pretty quick. If you're not securing the device at that individual level, it multiplies pretty quick. Especially if we look at the speed of digital transformation over the last, especially over the last couple of years, because of the way that the world has had to operate. But we see that to continue to accelerate. Just the sheer number of connected devices that are arriving on cloud networks. Those entities are really starting to care a lot about the device level security. And it actually links as well. If we kind of take it one step further, if you think a lot of those devices are data driven, so you're then back to sort of, I want to trust my data because my data drives my service. And actually, if you add in, the sort of the rise of machine learning and artificial intelligence, actually that data is driving insights that are used to deliver services. So, you really want to trust where that data is coming from. You want to trust that those devices are the ones you think they are and they're not being manipulated. So we see that need growing, kind of exponentially, actually, in terms of, the need for trusted, secure components at the edge.
Yeah. Thank you for that. No, I think it's important. I think the continual awareness, as you say, is great, because I think sometimes it's not until people are really affected on an individual basis, be that their company or within their family, by a security breach, they start to look at it, and that mass adoption is the lacking part sometimes, because the work that you're doing is no doubt fantastic. The promotion that you're doing is great, but equally, I don't know what the actual numbers are, but I think I've read it in the past. But the common man just still doesn't see the importance of it, right? And I think sometimes not until there's a real issue and that you're physically affected by it do you take notice.
Yeah.
David, what's the future holding then for IoT security? What can we expect to see in the short and medium term in terms of advancements made?
Yeah, I think there's a few things, actually. I mean, obviously, growing awareness and adoption of root of trust, trusted components, root of trust. We see that great momentum that we have now with PSA Certified. We're excited about how that's moving forward, and And I think really what comes next is the way that the OEMs and the broader business environment engage with that. So, that's why we carry on with this process of driving best practice and education into the market. I think it's in the end, it's going to be a combination of, regulation and companies wishing to demonstrate best practice because they recognize, that they can do business better because of it. So, we're excited. We're very much looking at that scalable route, so how PSA Certified grows on that theme of collaboration. So that's collaboration with the ecosystem, collaboration with other initiatives. I think that if you stand back and look at what the electronics industry has to do, we can only do it jointly. So, we're kind of wholeheartedly embracing that approach. And looking forward to kind of seeing that further rapid growth of an understanding of why security needs to be kind of your first thought when you're developing a product and not an afterthought later on. We can't allow people to learn through bad experiences permanently. That would be a failing on the electronics industry. We have to be proactive in what we're driving.
Fantastic, and what a way to end the podcast. That's really poignant phrase. David, thank you so much for your time today. It's really been great to understand more about yourself and PSA Certified. For our listeners, where can we find out more information? I assume you're on a website,
Sure.
Social media.
Absolutely, yeah. So psacertified.org is the website, and then you can find us at PSA Certified on the social media, LinkedIn and Twitter. But yeah, I'd encourage you to have a look at and listen to the podcast as well, the Beyond the Veil podcast. So yeah, absolutely. No, thank you very much indeed. I appreciate it. It's been great having a chat with you, Tom. Really great. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
As always, guys, if you'd like to find out more, please get involved in the comments. Click on the link, subscribe, like, share, save, send, print, file, store. Everything as usual that we normally ask you to do, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Cheers.